Hi, I'm Randi Altman with postPerspective. We're here to talk about virtual workstations, and I'd like you to meet our panel for today. Corbin, do you want to start, and then we could go around? Tell us your title, your company, your name.
Sure. My name's Corbin Gossett. I'm a senior product manager at AWS, and I'm working on our studio in the cloud side of the business.
Jeff?
I'm Jeff Bell. I'm the COO of Tangent Studios and CEO of Tangent Labs. We both do production on the Tangent Animation side, and we also create commercial software on the Tangent Labs side.
Great. Anne?
Hi, I'm Anne Hecht, and I am the Senior Product Marketing Manager for GPU virtualization in our cloud platform instances, like the virtual workstation on AWS.
Fantastic. We're here to talk about virtual workstations. And I think that a lot of people aren't exactly sure what that means. So if you wouldn't mind, maybe Corbin, starting off, how Amazon thinks of a virtual workstation.
So Amazon has EC2 compute, which can be used for virtual workstations, whether that's headless or not. And with the NVIDIA GPUs, we now have the G4s, which are an instance type that allows you to stream a virtual workstation with, full-on GPU-backed resources, so that you can run, high-end applications such as Maya, Nuke, Blender, that are used pretty much in the content creation industry.
Okay. Anybody else want to talk about what they see as a virtual workstation? I mean, Jeff, you come at this from a user perspective, but also you're making software that works in virtual workstations. So, how would you describe it to someone that just didn't know?
Well, I mean, the interesting thing about virtual workstations hosted, say, on AWS, which is what we use, is from our standpoint, it means that the computer that's basically being used to access the virtual workstation could be as small as a NUC, like a next unit of computing device, which is very tiny and very inexpensive. It could be a very low cost, low powered laptop, or it could be a workstation. So it gives us a lot of flexibility in terms of being able to provision a workstation that can actually perform the type of animation work done in packages like Blender or Maya or Houdini or packages like that. And it also gives us the flexibility to choose the size of the virtual instance that we require, so you can actually scale up and scale down as the workloads for the artists change. So one day they may require a very heavy sort of virtual workstation sitting in the cloud. The next day, maybe they're doing some work that doesn't require it, so you can actually scale it back. So from a production standpoint, it's very interesting because it allows you to minimize costs and maximize the throughput of the artists. There was a big change on AWS. I think was it the M60s before, Corbin?
Yeah.
Yeah, so when we went from testing and using the M60s to G4s, there was a massive improvement in the performance. So that's the other really interesting thing, is that as a studio, we no longer have to worry about end-of-lifing machines, because basically Amazon deals with that stuff for us. So.
Fantastic. And Anne, why don't you talk about how your technology is being used specifically with the Amazon virtual?
Yeah. So I think those were great segues, talking about the M60 and the T4 and the value that you saw, Jeff, from migrating from an M60 virtual workstation to a T4, which is the G4 instance that Corbin referenced. And what NVIDIA, envisions as a virtual workstation, it's remotely accessible from anywhere, right? And the other nice thing about it is it can be accessed from any device, because it's running in the cloud as opposed to on the local endpoint. So it gives a lot of freedom to the artist to be able to work wherever they need to work, which is obviously incredibly important right now. And so we bring to the cloud our GPUs, as well as the Quadro software, the Quadro APIs, and the Quadro, drivers and libraries, so that all those great ISV applications that do rendering and simulation and content creation have access to, all the certifications that they would actually rely upon if it was on a physical workstation. So we really are emulating a physical workstation experience but from the cloud. So the technology that, you know, an artist would buy and deploy in a physical workstation that they would have at their desk with a Quadro GPU is the same technology they're getting from AWS in the cloud. And T4 brought to market our RT cores, which enables RTX, real-time ray tracing, interactive, you know, rendering in the viewport, right, in the rendering application like Maya with Arnold. So it gives us just a phenomenally better experience. And, you know, when AWS migrated to T4, they brought with them and enabled artists to access that latest and greatest computer graphics and the Quadro certifications for those ISVs so that they could switch on and really upgrade their virtual workstation, you know, with the change of a script, you know, with just, enabling a different instance, which means all the artists can now be on the same platform. They can upgrade their software, and they have just a much more powerful experience and you know, the latest and greatest tools at their access from anywhere they want to work.
Yeah, the cool thing about that is that, you know, as Jeff was saying, it's like you can use these little nooks, which are these really small kind of small form factor, you know, computers, and all the way up to, you know, a full workstation to stream your virtual workstation. But the idea is that, like, I can have a Chromebook, which has no software at all, and I could, you know, go down to the local coffee shop, and as long as I have a good internet connection, I can log into a very powerful workstation and stream that. And now I have access to Nuke and to Blender and Maya. And I think, you know, I was talking to Jeff the other day, and it seems like you were talking about going to your cabin and being able to do that.
Yep.
Like, that's really cool.
Yeah, and you know, at the cabin, I only took my little Microsoft Surface, right? So that wouldn't have been capable of doing real production work, but via virtual workstation, it is, which is really cool. So whether it's an iPad or a small tablet or something like that, it really opens up the ability to do production work. Very, you know, makes it very simple.
Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to talk a little bit about was with the way we've developed our software too, it is actually possible to have a complete virtual studio with no local data, and everything exists in the cloud, and there's no egress other than, say, the final imagery at the end. I mean, it really opens up some interesting possibilities for either pre-existing studios or new studios coming up.
Yeah, and Jeff, that probably helps you with collaboration, right? I mean, you don't have artists trying to share a thumb drive. You know, it's all getting updated in real time in the cloud, and everybody can see what everybody else is contributing, working on, and the impact of those changes.
Yeah,
exactly.
I kind of equate it to the, you know, when everyone went from the, you know, on premises, you know, email kind of solution where I had, you know, my Exchange back in and I had to log in and everything at work, and then I'd go home and I wouldn't have access to it, you know, and then things like Gmail and Hotmail and all those kind of cloud-based emails came along, and really I could be at work and I could be checking my email and I go home and I have access to that same thing. That's what this virtual workstation and these virtual studios. So I could be at work and be on premises and in the studio, and I can be working and have access to all my data and my hardware and my virtual workstations. And then I can go home, and if I need to check something and log in, it's the exact same environment. So there's no change in terms of my workflow and, you know, having to change how I approach the problem set. It's just all there. And that's at the Starbucks, that's at my home, that's at work, you know, or wherever. And that's a really powerful statement, and especially with what we're going through today.
Exactly, and working remotely is never been more important. But let's just circle back a little bit. Let's say somebody's never worked this way before. Can you describe what their experience would be in terms of choosing the right way to do it? How do they begin?
So, you know, this is one of the barriers that I think a lot of the cloud companies, including us, are really kind of concentrating on, is making that process easier. And so, you know, really the first and foremost thing that they need is a good internet connection. You're trading infrastructure really for now, fast internet connection. And so, you know, you need a good internet connection. We have things that are called AMIs, or Amazon Machine Images. Those are really the software in the OS that you need access to. And that's going to include the streaming protocol that you want to use. So whether that's using something like AWS Nice DCV or Teradici, you know, or one of those streaming protocols, that's the software that's actually going to virtual stream the pixels, you know, from the data cloud to your home. And then you need to decide on the instance types. And, you know, with the G4s, there's everything from the low end 2XLs all the way up to the 16XLs, which allow you to kind of scale depending on the needs. And every task is going to be different. So it's hard to say what type of machine. You can always start small. And if you get to the point where that is starting to struggle with the particular task that you're working on, whether that's, you know, computing, you know, a background and rendering, or a big visual effects in Houdini, you can then bump that up to a new machine type. And that's something you can't really do with on-prem hardware, because you'd have to like literally go buy new hardware. Yeah. So there's not a lot that you need, but you do need to kind of make some decisions on you know, and in Jeff's case, like, what kind of pipeline am I going to use? What's my back end? Where am I storing my data? How, you know, what region am I going to be in? So there's some decisions that you make ahead of time, but once you get up and running, then it's very fluid in terms of how you get around.
And are the places that these people could go sort of like FAQs type of stuff, or consultants or stuff like that that'll help make the process easier?
Yeah, there's both. I mean, there's, you know, there's systems integrators or solution architects that can help people get up in speed. We actually have a bunch of tutorials that were written by artists for artists that kind of walk through. Actually, an old colleague of Jeff and I's, Jason Schleifer, has a great blog post on all the steps needed to kind of really build a virtual studio, including render farm, virtual workstations, and like that. And so it's a real easy kind of step-by-step process to run through. And we're also working on a thing, virtual workstations for visual effects, which is kind of a new agenda that allows us to just quickly get a machine up and running with some software so that you can test it out and see, like, is this a good solution for me and my studio? And then from there, it helps you kind of make the decisions, and you can start to plan out more your migration plan.
Corbin, we've been working with some of the folks on your team at AWS on a campaign for the virtual workstation instances on AWS. And, you know, we have videos also on our site as well as on AWS's site on how to get it up and running. And it's, you know, it takes a few minutes. And then there's also the tutorials that Corbin talked about in a program right now. I don't know how long it's going to run, but it's a credit program so that someone can go through the tutorial and also have credits to be able to run, you know, that instance for a while and actually play around with it and experiment with it. It's really for an individual artist who wants to check it out. But it's a great program that's part of the recent creativity campaign we have going with AWS and NVIDIA.
Fantastic. And we've been talking about using software, and I know that these guys want the creatives want it to be a seamless process for themselves. They just want to create. So making sure that they have the software that they're comfortable with, that's often empowered by the RTX. What about licensing for these? What would you suggest? Do they need a floating license? What do they need to do to make sure that they have the software that they use every day working on a virtual workstation?
That's a great question that could take us down many rabbit holes. You know, I think licensing is one of the issues that continuously is getting better. It's not there yet. You know, and if you're a company that relies on open source, it's even better. I'll let Jeff go into that. But if you're using a lot of the software that you're used to today with what you already have access with on-premises, you can use those same licenses, and it really depends on the ISV, because every ISV has a different licensing mechanism. Some are more cloud friendly, others are working on becoming more cloud friendly. And, you know, if you take, like, for example, Adobe, they have, you know, with Adobe's Creative Cloud, I can just log in from any machine. So very similar, as long as I have a virtual workstation, regardless of the instance type, I can just log into my Adobe account and I can start using the software. Same thing with, you know, Autodesk is moving in that direction. Some of the other software vendors are moving in that direction. And so it really depends on the ISV. But floating licenses definitely help, because then I can have a license server and I can point to that license server. And what's cool is that license server can also feed both the on-premise as well as the cloud-based solution.
I was going to say, I think it's an inevitability that all of the DCC, like all the digital content creation companies they will figure it out, because there's more and more pressure to move in this direction.
Yeah, I was just going to add that we work with a lot of those ISVs because they certify on Quadro. And they test on Quadro, right? And then it obviously becomes part of the conversation we're having with them. And we're seeing, especially in the last few months, more and more interest and ask for guidance around, certifying testing in the cloud on instances. So we're helping a number of them do that. I know Adobe just published a series of deployment guides for their software and guidance on, what instance they recommend. At AWS, it's the G4 instance, not surprising, right, for their software. Because they want their customers to be able to run their software wherever they are, and they understand that on-prem, at the office isn't always possible anymore. So I think for anybody who's maybe struggling with that, I would talk to your ISV sales rep, let them know your problem, because I think they're really realizing that they need to work with their customers to add some flexibility to their licensing so that they can get up and running. And if you let them know AWS has the Quadro technology that they're already certified on, it's running in the cloud, we can also help with some of that testing if they need to, and I'm sure AWS can as well. And I think as a business community, we're all trying to help get people up and running and productive, right? We all want that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And so Jeff, going back to you and your software, you were a user first and you had a need to fill and you created your own tool. Why did you choose to put it in the cloud? How does that help? Can you explain how that helps people that are going to be using software?
Sure. So it's basically a forward-thinking thing. As Corbin was saying earlier, if you decide that you need more horsepower to get a particular job done, it requires buying more hardware. So, and typically we write off hardware after about 3 years. But after 2 years, you're already behind the curve in terms of performance, and you've got certain portions of your floor that have certain, yes, the performance might have been good 2 years ago, but it's not acceptable anymore. So those capital expenditures too can be pretty large at the beginning of these projects, and it's also usually stacked up at the beginning in terms of the budget and cash flow. With virtual workstations, as artists come on, that's when we actually start utilizing the virtual workstations. So the costs get pushed out and they go from being a capital expenditure to an operating expense, which is really, when you have these tight budgets on film productions and TV productions, it really, really helps cash flow. So, yeah, we looked at, we said, where do we want to be? And, even though we weren't there on day one when we started this company about 5 years ago, that was in our business plan, that's where we're heading, because we could see the writing on the wall.
Okay. And with the COVID pandemic and people working from home, more people have embraced the cloud that might not have wanted to, right? Yep. So they've jumped into this. Let's talk about security, because a lot of people are concerned about that. They need to work in the cloud, they need to work remotely, but how can we make them feel good about protecting their data?
Security is an important one, and at AWS, obviously, it's a very top priority for us. And you'll see a lot of the same security kind of isolations that you would employ in traditional data centers that AWS does as well for our data centers. But it's also a shared responsibility model with the customer. And so customers that are either building applications on top of AWS or customers that are using it for a studio still need to have some of the responsibility in terms of making sure they're building on top of the right security models, which we provide tons of great information and resources towards helping that, because the infrastructure is secure, but there's ways of making your data not secure. So making sure, you're encrypting your data both at rest and in flight. Those kind of simple things helps answer that kind of security question. But we're also working with like the Trusted Partner Network and the MPAA to make sure that, studios feel comfortable using clients and vendors that are on AWS. So it's definitely important. I don't know, Jeff, have you guys run into that?
Not really. I mean, basically most of the clients that we've dealt with over the last 5 years have also been on Amazon. So they're already aware of it. In fact, Netflix is, I think, one of the largest Amazon clients out there. Yeah. So in terms of security, I'll give you an example of the software that we're creating for commercial release the next 3-4 months. We've actually worked with ethical hackers to try and poke holes in our system to try and ensure that it's as secure as we could possibly make it on top of the AWS platform. And then coming back to virtual workstations, the other advantage of virtual workstation is none of the file data is coming local. It's basically streaming from the cloud. So you've also closed off other portions of your security threats to the point where basically the only thing that somebody could potentially do is take a screenshot of their monitor. So that definitely helps a lot as well.
I love the word ethical
Yeah, that's what I've heard. That's an oxymoron, right?
Yeah.
But Jeff, I think that's a great, you make some good points, and I've heard that from some other customers as well, even other industries, that there's nothing here on this local device, so you don't have to worry about people losing their laptop or it crashing, right, and you lose data and maybe files that way because it crashed. And everything is protected in the cloud, and you can lock it down and protect it a lot easier if it's in a data center that has security provisions that are first rate, right, as opposed to potentially security provisions that might change, and nothing's walking around on a thumb drive that can be left or dispersed to somebody who shouldn't have it, right?
And as good as our IT staff is, they're not Amazon. So in some ways, I actually trust our data more sitting on Amazon than I do sitting on our local filers. So.
Yeah, and security comes with choice, and you can lock and button everything up and lock it down, and then you can also you can open that up. So if you want people to have access to download the data, or you don't want to have access to download the data, you can control that, and you can also control the security keys that we encrypt the data. So we can hold on to those keys, or you can actually hold on to those keys, and without those keys, nobody's going to have access to that data. And so that's really a choice up to the customer as they build their studio or as they build their infrastructure on top of AWS.
Okay, so let's talk about storage and virtual workstations. How can people make sure they have what they need? How can they get their data? Who wants to, Corbin, do you want to jump on that?
Storage is a deep conversation. Again, there's many different solutions out there, both from partners that sit on top of AWS, such as Weka or Cumulo. And these are virtual file systems that can dynamically grow and shrink as you need them, which is kind of back to the point of being able to scale and elastically use only the resources that you need. Things like AWS FSx, both Lustre and for Windows, allows you to scale up and use those resources, and when you don't need them, you can scale down those resources and reprovision them. So we've seen some customers that store everything in S3, which is very fast, cheap storage. It's replicated for backup. You can archive it. There's different tiers that you can store it in. And then every morning when they spin up a workstation, they pull that data down onto like a Lustre system, which is a very high speed, scalable storage solution. And then they use that for the day. And at the end of the day, it's all sucked back into S3. They shut everything down and they reprovision it the next day. So there's different approaches that you can take to doing that storage. You can keep it around all the time. You can archive it. You can have it on-prem and sync it up to the cloud. But there's many different types of solutions for storage, really depending on the type of task. Some tasks, you don't need access to high-speed storage. And other ones, my I/O is so in and out, and I'm so many IOPS per second that I need the fastest kind of storage I can get. And so you might be using something like FSx for Lustre or a Weka system where they're really high-speed solutions.
One of the great things on AWS as well is the incredibly cheap long-term offline storage via Glacier and the different levels of Glacier too. So as Corbin says, there's a variety of different solutions all the way down to archiving. So we no longer actually, we do have local copies of all the data, and those are for insurance purposes considered a copy. But I trust the data that's sitting on the AWS servers almost more than the ones sitting on our servers. So.
Corbin, when we had spoken the other day, you had talked about something called snow cone. I know it's a little off topic, but it's storage related. Can you just tell us what that is?
Yeah, so there's AWS has a family of products, what we call the Snow families, and Snow Cone is a new addition to that, and it's a small kind of almost like what Jeff was talking about, a Nook. It's a small little secure kind of edge computing storage device that that can literally, we will ship it to you in the mail. It'll show up at wherever you get it shipped to. And the idea is that there's a lot of things that still need kind of location-based storage. So if I'm doing a live action shoot where I've got my my high definition red camera and I'm shooting high-end digital background plates, I need to store that somewhere, and then I need to get that into the cloud. And so these files can be huge and gigantic. And so I'm not going to sit there with a laptop and my phone connection to try to upload those, or even back at the hotel while I'm during the shoot at the end of the day trying to upload those over the wireless at the hotel. I can actually put those onto a snow cone, which is going to have, and I can't remember the exact like 8 terabytes of data, but you're going to put all that data on there, and then you just put it back in the mail. You literally put it in the mailbox, and then it gets shipped to Amazon, put onto S3, and then you have access to it. So the snow cone and the snowmobile is literally like a semi if you need to do large amounts of data, and it's solving 2 problem sets. One is the location based, and also if I've got a ton of and some of our customers have petabytes of data that are on-prem and they don't have a backup solution or a good one that can keep pace with their growth. And so they want to move that to the cloud and put that into cheap Glacier storage, is what Jeff was talking about. So they could get a snow cone and put their data on that and then send that over, as opposed to spending maybe days, weeks, months of trying to sync that to the cloud.
Yeah, we moved I think 1/8 of a petabyte of data to basically prime our show sitting on the AWS servers, and that one I think it was called a Snowball.
Snowball, yeah.
Snowball, yeah. So the process didn't transferring that amount of data takes a while, but once it was transferred, it ended up on the AWS servers very quickly. So.
Okay. Well, let's talk again about people working from home, having to scramble, figure out different ways to work remotely, to collaborate, to work in the cloud. Do you guys see that once this all ends, people are still going to be working this way? Is it going to be a combination of on-prem, off-prem? What do you see, Ann? Did you want to take that?
Yeah, we just did a round of briefings with some of the industry analysts, and one analyst said, and I thought this resonated really well with me at least, and he said, being able to work from home is going to be an employee benefit, just like healthcare, 401k. It's going to be how companies compete for the best talent. They need to have it as a benefit that they offer their employees. And I think for media and entertainment, where it hasn't been as readily acceptable in terms of culture, I think that you will see, and we're hearing, from our customers in this segment, more and more interest about, look, we need to figure out how we enable these workers, and these employees, these artists to work from anywhere and not require them to come into studios and offices, and give them that flexibility. And there's something very empowering about that, right? I mean, I know I really enjoy the lower traffic levels in my neighborhood. I like, not having to commute. Yeah. It's better for the environment. I think people will still come into the office and collaborate in, face to face. And we'll need that kind of human connectivity, definitely. I don't think that's going to go away, but I don't think it's going to be back to the normal we had pre-COVID. I think there'll be more agile work solutions, more flexibility, and that's where cloud comes in, right? That's really supports a lot of that agility and flexibility. You can work from anywhere, as well as in the office, as well as at home, right? It can follow the human instead of the human having to go to where the work is, right? It goes, the work capacity follows where the human needs to be and wants to be.
So we, just as an example, we just ran a large survey within the company. I guess we're up to about 360, 370 people now. And everyone is very interested in being able to have more flexible work arrangements. So it's very unlikely that Tangent will have the same look and feel when all this is over and we decide people are going to go back. We're essentially sitting at 100% productivity. Like our productivity is no different than it was when we were sitting in the office. So now it's a matter of working with our employees to try and figure out work splits. So maybe it's 2 days a week at the work and then 3 days the next week, or maybe it's the whole week and then you're off the following week, or maybe it's this team and that team. So it's really interesting to try and re-envision the way these offices are set up. And from a company standpoint too, that also means that we can grow without getting more brick and mortar and concentrate more on employees and producing more work. So
yeah,
I think there's some real advantages.
You know, I think, Anne, I think you said it really well in terms of it's the flexibility, and we're hearing a lot of the same stuff from customers that we've been talking to, which is, you know, they're now questioning their brick and mortar and the real estate that they're spending all of that capital on, when, you know, they're getting the same, you know, as Jeff, you were saying, the 100%, the same level of productivity with a remote workforce. And that now all of a sudden opens up a whole new door to, you know, a more global kind of access to talent that you didn't have. Like, you know, trying to find the people that, you know, are in the same city that can come work for you. Now, you know, I can hire that amazing modeler that just happens to live in, you know, Idaho or Ohio or, you know, wherever that's away from, you know, the main kind of brick and mortar location. I personally still love going into the office. There's something about disconnecting from home, but I love the flexibility of being able to just come home and spend a day and, you know, head down and do what I need to do, but then go back into the office and collaborate. And the fact that my work environment doesn't really change in terms of how I approach my workstation is a bonus. And I think companies going forward, it's going to be a hindrance if they don't have that kind of support and flexibility.
That's right. There needs to be a consistent digital work environment wherever the employee is working. But I agree, it's going to be a combo, face-to-face and then working remote. And then it does enable, you know, these companies to recruit the best talent wherever the talent is, which is also, I think, a great thing. It also means we don't all have to live in these really expensive real estate neighborhoods either, right?
That is true.
We've actually had some employees make those decisions because we started the discussions about remote work, and they were concerned about commute. So we, you know, in the discussions, like, go ahead, if you want to do that, we can accommodate you. So,
yeah, that's a great perk for any company, I think.
Absolutely. So, the movement to the cloud, I don't know if you're all familiar with the Movie Labs white paper. They, just about a year ago, they introduced it. It's all the major studios, and they all got together and they decided, you know, by 2030, we'd really like everything to be in the cloud. And, you know, obviously it's not, I think that we're going to get there incrementally. Do you guys want to talk about how you see that path working?
Yeah, you know, I think what we've noticed is that a lot of the customers that have expressed interest or had expressed interest in kind of cloud computing and studio in the cloud, they were all looking at kind of a 1 to 3 year kind of plan. They had started to kind of, you know, spec that out and see what that migration story was going to be. And I think, you know, where we are today, that just sped that time frame up. And it also then made a lot of companies that maybe weren't contacting us or reaching out to companies that can do this, start doing that and saying, hey, we need a solution, we need ideas, we need to understand that. So, you know, I think that time frame that the Movie Labs put out there kind of probably changed in terms of how quickly that will change, and, you know, and the flexibility that we were just talking about with companies that already support that is just going to help that move faster.
Great. So
yeah, that's what we're seeing. Just acceleration to the cloud. Sorry, Randy.
Oh, that's okay. I don't want to cut you off. Did you have other stuff that you wanted to add?
No, that was it. That's fine.
Okay. So we're getting to the point in the panel where maybe some Q&As from people, some questions. Collected a couple from some VFX artists who, one person asked, what options are available in selecting system specs on the virtual workstation, such as CPU, memory, and storage?
So on AWS, there's a pricing sheet. If you search for AWS G4 instances, you'll find all kinds of documentation on it. But it goes through and explains how the G4 extra large, has X number of CPUs and memory, and and what kind of NVIDIA GPU, and you can go all the way up to G4 metals, which are going to be 96 virtual cores, 384 gigabytes of memory, and then 8 GPUs. I mean, that thing is a monster. And I would love to get my hands on one to test, because I'd love to just try getting something like Redshift or some render that has GPU support, just to see what that thing can do.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's all kinds of options, and it's all available online.
Okay. Another person asked about the variety of types of machines offered. So he's saying some Teradici services offer basically 8-thread or 16-thread versions. Even though on AWS, for instance, could you spin up a 64-thread machine if you wanted to?
Yes, you could. Now, I'm not 100% sure through how they're accessing it through Teradici, but technically you could build your own instance. And that would be like probably what's the default, kind of what we're calling more the base, which is the 4XL, which is going to be, or actually, no, I'm sorry, he said 64.
Yeah.
So that'd be a 16XL, which would be, 64 virtual CPUs, 256 gigs of memory, and then a single NVIDIA GPU graphics card.
Okay. Another person asks about installing software like Slack or Rocket Chat for better communication. And that's important too, because you do have to communicate with the people that you're working with. So is that something that is offered?
Yeah, it's, the way Amazon works is, as I mentioned a little earlier, is that there's the AMIs, or the Amazon Machine Images, which is whatever software you want on there. And so, you can approach it two different ways. I can have some of that software on my little Nook or my local, kind of endpoint that I have sitting on my desk, my laptop, or I can put all of that software like Slack and VS Code and VI, or any of the other little utilities that you're used to every day. So basically the rule of thumb is for the most part, everything that you use today or that you're used to and that you rely on is available to install onto an AMI and bring up on a virtual workstation.
Yeah, at Tangent, we basically have we have an image for on-prem machines, and then we have an image for the virtual workstations, and they're very, very similar. So
Great. For everybody, I'm asking everybody this question. How do you make sure that you're keeping your employees, people that you work with, in contact? I mean, are you doing more Zoom calls? Because it is important to be seeing and communicating with each other. What are you doing?
do you want me to go first?
Sure.
So we utilize mostly Microsoft products, Office 365 products, and we migrated to Teams a while back. It's very similar in some ways to Slack with webhooks and plugins and add-ons and all that stuff. So it's become our sort of hub while our 350 plus people are off. It's used for all of our calendaring, all of our meetings, all of our chats. So that's how we keep people sort of tied together and informed. And then, of course, our project management system as well, which has interactive multi-site reviews and other things along those lines. So,
Anne?
Yeah, sure. We're video conferencing. We're very meeting. NVIDIA is very collaborative. It's a very flat organization, right? There's not a lot of hierarchy there. So there's a lot of meetings and collaboration that happens across teams, which is harder now that we're all remote. But we do a lot of, video conferencing, just like we're doing here. And as much as possible, turn the camera on. It's not always as easy, right? Because you didn't maybe comb your hair that morning, or you're feeling a little tired, or you didn't shower after your run in the morning. But there is a culture of sort of like try to turn that camera on so you can actually see each other. And it does change the dynamics a little bit when people are actually interacting with one another face to face, even if it's through a video.
it's something that, I spend a lot of time in Zoom, and in Chime and in Slack, and the one thing that I actually really miss a lot, and if you guys have solutions, I'm all ears, is just whiteboarding. Like I love the idea of just sitting in a room and whiteboarding, and having that collaboration around just kind of drawing and making ideas and coming up with, and it's just one thing I have yet to find the perfect solution for. Chat is obviously, Slack and Chime and those are great for just typing and having that conversation really easily. It's like someone's right next to you, but that interaction, I miss that.
So for us, Teams has a whiteboard feature for their meetings.
Oh, really?
So
Okay.
we use that occasionally. But the other thing that we do is we actually use, I got a little plug here, but we actually use Loop, and we put a 30 or 40 frame blank white movie into our review tool.
Yeah.
And everyone logs in and does their whiteboarding in our review
Oh,
tool.
that's a good idea. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I just missed that. There's something about, those pens. I don't know.
It's tactile.
Yep.
Yeah, I do miss my whiteboards because my whole wall is nothing but whiteboard.
Yeah.
Whiteboard fanatic.
Well, guys, this has been great. Before we shut down, is there anything that we missed? Any topics that you feel is important? Anything?
I think from AWS's standpoint, I think that the thing that we're really spending a lot of our effort is to make it more approachable. And that part of it is that the technology is there, it's capable. And I think, and some of the other conversations we've been having is that it's a change management. And I think if you plan it out and define what it is that what is success for moving to the cloud, there's studios doing it today and they're successful. And Jeff is a great example of a company that's already been doing it with Tangent. So I think,
what's the company in the UK? Is it Fuse?
There's Untold Studios, there's
Untold.
Crown VFX, and
Right.
there's a bunch of studios that are now 100%, virtual, and it's amazing what they're able to, it's like they didn't even blink an eye when all of this kind of hit. They just kept working, and that's a pretty powerful statement. So it's possible, and I think people are just now trying to figure out, like, okay, where do I begin? And that's where we can help.
Yeah, and I think I'd like to also add to what Corbin said, that these are really hard times, right? And concerning worldwide, right? And it's sad to see, but this is also an opportunity to reinvent maybe how we work, how we collaborate, and the technology is there. And while I think media and entertainment, because of the security and culture, has been less enthusiastic about moving to the cloud and doing remote work, there are other industries that we work with every day, in architecture, manufacturing, even in the Fed space, that are using cloud and remote workstations and virtual workstations to do work. One of our customers is an automobile, it's Honda, and they do all their R&D on virtual workstations because they lost so much IP during the 2011 earthquake. So they made the decision to put everything in the data center and to do everything virtually. Now, culturally, they go into the office to work on those virtual workstations. They aren't working from home. I mean, they are now. But there's a precedent in other industries. So I guess I just want our friends in the media and entertainment industry to know that you're not inventing a new wheel here. Like it is being used by other industries. It is effective. It's safe. It's secure. It's performant. And we need great content now. I need new videos to watch. I need to be able to sit with my kids and create, watch wonderful, digital content. And so I want the artists to have the tools they need so they can continue to create the kind of videos and shows that I want to watch with my family.
I need my content.
Well, thank you all for joining us today and talking about the cloud and virtual workstations. I really appreciate it. Jeff and Corbin, thank you all.